Good and fairly cool Monday evening, one and all. William Theo here, homegrown and mighty glad to bring you PTV News Now. Atop our news leaderboard in the evening, the impeachment train has long left the station and is nearly halfway to its destination. And there should be no pit stops or layovers in the way once the connecting trip in the Senate kicks off. A rehash of the president's take and sentiments on the impending Senate trial of the vice president in the Senate in continuance or resumption of impeachment proceedings against her, which she expressed in the pilot offering of newest program for public dissemination, the BBM podcast, which kicked off earlier today. The president stressed the impeachment process in its second and final phase, where 24 senators of the Republic will listen to arguments for and against the vice president on her alleged misuse of intelligence and confidential funds in her time as DepEd chief, and each render a decision whether to remove her from office or otherwise. Early on last year, before the lower house decided to launch a probe on this reported misuse or abuse of her allocated intelligence and confidential funds for fiscal year 2022. The president indicated his wishes not to push through with impeachment, which he felt was divisive and inimical to the interests of keeping the country together and moving forward. But the House has a separate and independent branch of the bureaucracy found overwhelming evidence of the vice president and her office's overspending and wanton misuse of tens of millions of pesos and a cover-up of her department's misdeeds, which she knew and approved. Thus, the president's change of heart and mind, which is anchored on the rule of law that begs accountability on all those who work in government, especially those who hold high positions. With just about every nation aligned on a need to slow down climate change, the United States under 47th U.S. President Donald Trump has taken an about-face and totally shelved discovery and development alternative renewable energy sources. Let's revisit this marked shift in policy, which would prove detrimental to the nation's vulnerable to extreme climates such as the Philippines. VOA's Patsy Widakuswara dwells on the challenges facing the United States government on its return to fossil-based fuels.
Countering climate change was central to former President Joe Biden's administration. But under President Donald Trump, the United States is going in a different direction.
Today, I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill.
When a president declares a national emergency, he has more executive authority to get things done, including deregulating industries to drill for oil and gas. On Friday, Trump added a geopolitical factor by saying that lowering oil prices is the key to ending the war in Ukraine.
OPEC ought to get on the ball and they ought to drop the price of oil, and that war will stop right away.
Analysts are skeptical that Trump's demands and policies will significantly impact oil prices.
You have to think about things like oil supply being driven by international, demand and other things that are going to be quite separate from a lot of the different kinds of policies that President Trump may be thinking of that could, around the margins, affect oil and gas exploration and extraction.
Analysts say low prices would also hurt Trump donors, the American fossil fuel industry. Renewable energy advocates point out that U.S. oil and gas is already at peak production.
And so if this is an emergency, why aren't we looking at all available resources, particularly the ones that are demonstrating real value on the grid, right? Why aren't we using all tools in the toolbox?
Trump, who has repeatedly called climate change a hoax, wants to slam the brakes on efforts to boost U.S. electric vehicles by rolling back tax credits for EV purchases and manufacturing that Congress passed during Biden's term.
We will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers.
But he will need congressional approval for such a move. Analysts say it's counterproductive to Trump's own stated goals of competing with China, who is already the world's largest producer of EVs.
There's a consensus among the academia that EV is the way to go. EV is the way to address our environmental concern. There's no turning back on the EV development.
Trump's Inauguration Day actions also included an order to withdraw the U.S. from international climate commitments.
The next item, sir, is a letter that will be transmitted to the United Nations explaining that we are withdrawing from the Paris Climate Treaty.
The U.S. is currently producing more oil and gas than any country at any time in history. Meanwhile, even as it keeps much of its fossil fuel production, China is the leading manufacturer of solar panels and wind turbines globally. It is also the planet's biggest climate polluter. Patsy Wirakuswara, VOA News, Washington.
At this juncture, let's turn to my colleague in PTV's Baguio City studios for what's hot and happening in the Cordilleras. Audrey?
Naimbag arabi, nguman nga to ti kaso ti human immunodeficiency virus acquired immunodeficiency syndrome wenno HIV-AIDS iti Cordillera Region. Iti datos ti Regional Epidemiology and Surveillance Unit dumanon iti 1,295 ti nailisa kaso ti HIV-AIDS sipud 1984 aging ga iti Pebrero itatawan. Nailisa ti kangatuan na kaso iti Baguio City a 734, Sarunwan ti Benguet a 190, Abra a 183, Kalinga 58 ken Ifugao a 55. Kaduan kadagiti nakaptan kat agtawon iti 15 aging ga 24 years old, ken 25 aging ga 34 years old. Kaduan kadagitoy kat lalaki. Imbinglay ti ahensya akadaw yan arason ti panakiyakar ti sakiti unprotected sex. Kadagiti timet lalaki ti panakinaig da iti padadaan lalaki.
Kahit pakonti-konti ang increase natin sa number of cases compared to our population, alarming talaga siya in a sense. As compared to last year of the same period, no? Masasabi natin na bahagyang nag-increase yung kaso natin, around 5%. Yung increase ng kaso natin as compared to the previous year.
Itidadumapay adamag ni 2nd Lieutenant Eros Osias ti may ka-266 ang nagturpos iti PMA Siklab-Laya 2025 wenno ti mauawagan na Class GOAT. Isuna ti lowest rank iti klase dangam para kenkwana dakkel ladta abanag daytoy gaputan nariga ti makapasaken makastrak iti PMA. Agraduar kumani Cadet First Class Osias iti 2024 ngem gapu iti medical reasons, temporaryo ang nagsardang kan intuloy namanen. Ubing pailang daytoy arapaap nan iti agbalin a soldado. Nagbali na katulungan ti inanay di pimusay ni tatang nakabayatan ti panagadal na iti akademya. Ngum sakbay nga imo iti PMA nagilako dayto itinatnateng tapno masuportara ti kasapulan ti pamilya na iti Rosales, Pangasinan. Sagot ni 2nd Lieutenant Eros Osias ti baligi na iti pimusay nga amana ken pinili na sumrek iti Philippine Army.
Life was really hard back then. So that's why I aim to really enter the academy because of the free education, to help my family financially. But upon my entry here in academy, that's when my passion to service came. My personal cadetship experience, I was a turn back, but now I can say, although I finished last, but I was able to outrank my past. To my father, Pa, tupad ng pangarap natin, sa wakas, ako bahala sa mga kapatid pa.
Dagiti damdamag manipud iti PTV Cordillera, siya ni Audrey Villana, naimbag arabi.
Many thanks, Audrey, and that's all for tonight. Join us anew tomorrow afternoon and evening for our twin bill of daily news break coverages. And keep in mind to always stay connected by catching the news right here.